Hey y'all, this is Jake, and I just wanted to let you know that this week I had a little bit of trouble editing the podcast. The website Zencaster that Brendan and I use to record from our different corners of the world provided a new look update and totally changed the functionality. So I apologize. It'll probably take me just a week to figure it out and get it back locked in. So I did the best I could with this one. I think it's still listenable, but if it doesn't sound as good as our regular podcasts, please excuse us this week and enjoy the show.
Why you talking back?
Welcome to Decision Space, the only show to take place right here in the space between the turns in your favorite games. I'm Jake Friedman.
And I'm Brendan Hansen.
And this is the podcast about decisions in games.
And in today's episode, it's about flipping time. We're covering Captain Flip, a 2 to 4 player tile-laying game that's really a light family game. This is Jake and I doing the decision space thing where we make a show all about delving into a decision space and then pick a light decision space so we can really rip it apart and talk about it from head to toe, from the tip of the mast to the bottom of the hole. We're going to see how many different boat references we could fit, ship references we could fit, starboard, aft. I can't spend them all right now.
All hands to port because it should be a fun episode. Maybe counterintuitively, it feels like the smallest decision spaces often lead to the best conversation in sort of this longer form decision space deep dive that we like to do and that we'll do again today. So I'm looking forward to it. Brendan, what do we have for housekeeping before we get into that deep dive conversation?
Oh my gosh. Well, we would love a review of Decision Space if you listen to the show and you enjoy it any amount. It's been so helpful in terms of discoverability for the show, and it goes so far for us to be able to read one out. We don't have a new one, and we recently had a nice smattering of them, so we'd love for you to go to wherever you listen to the show, Apple Podcasts otherwise, and leave us a review. And if you don't have a way of leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, but still want to leave a review that we could read out on the show and review it on, say, Spotify, feel free to send it to us in our Discord or something. We'll make sure it happens. But yeah, thank you to all of you who have written a review of the show before, and we love to review your reviews live on air. Should we get into our ratings and reviews?
Yeah, let's jump right into our ratings and reviews for the show. Do you want to go first or should I?
I think I have a sense that I'm going to be coming out more positive on this game. Not that it matters, as these reviews just start to give sort of an inside sort of look into how we feel about the game to give listeners an impression so you can better understand where we're coming from and really the heart of the show, the second half. But Jake, why don't you start and then I'll lift our boats. Or
yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
I'm wrong. Maybe you love this game.
Yeah, maybe you're way off base. So Captain Flip is a very, very slight decision space that feels like the designers were asking a question about, how can we make a game that has the inherent randomness of a coin flip with a heads and a tails, fun and exciting. And I think Captain Flip almost delivers on that premise. It's so fast and so slight to be completely inoffensive. And my first few plays of it, I was thoroughly enjoying it and wanting to show it to additional people. And for a game this quick, I think that is all it really takes to be a fun and successful product. That being said, it has not left me eager to continue playing it repeatedly, to continue learning about the game and finding ways to push against that inherent randomness to find small edges over my opponent. And we'll get more into the reasons why in the deep dive, I'm sure. So where I'm at now, I started pretty warm on it, but I've been cooling. And I think for me, it's just a 5 out of 10. Think that I wouldn't say no because I hate it, but I think I would if it was longer, perhaps, than it is.
Captain Flip that gives players just enough agency to nudge the tiles in the right direction so as to prevent the pursuit from feeling totally frivolous. Captain Flip is a delight that sets out to do what it aims with the fullness of tailwinds in its sail, and a game I really enjoy when I'm looking for a light family adventure. 8.5 out of 10. I like this game on Board Game Arena as much as I like it on the table. Now that I've gotten to play it a few times with Maya, it just zips. It's a quick game. This is really, at 2 players, 10 minutes or less. And I think that's part of what brings me back in. And it's something like you mentioned, I feel I could put in front of really anyone. So that's where I'm coming at from.
Yeah, I think the length of the game is intrinsically tied to the decision space in
Yeah.
some interesting ways as well. So we'll definitely get into that more on the flip side for our deep dive. But Brendan, why don't you tell us a little bit about the game history and background, and perhaps why it's in the news today?
Yeah, so exciting news. Captain Flip, we were going to cover this week anyway, but it was nominated for the 2024 Spiel des Jahres. So the Spiel des Jahres, for listeners who don't know, is the largest board game award in Germany, and by consequence, the largest board game award around. And the Spiel des Jahres is really, in its main category, is really for family games. And this was one of the nominated games. That's very exciting. In poking around for this episode and wanting to do the game background, learned that this game is published by Play Punk, which is Antoine Bauza, the designer of Seven Wonders and Hanabi's publishing company, alongside Thomas Provoost, who is also the co-founder of Repost Productions, who published games like Seven Wonders and Just One. So powerhouse sort of board game industry people coming together and making this new game company, Play Punk. Captain Flip is their first game, nominated for the Spiel des Jahres, but they did not design it. This is not an Antoine Bauza or Thomas Provoost designed game. This is designed by Remo Cazadori, who is known for things like Three Ring Circus and Fairy Tale Inn, a game he co-designed with the co-designer of this game, Paolo Mori. And you might know Paolo Mori's name from games like Caesar, Seize Rome in 20 Minutes, Libertalia, Ethnos, or Pandemic Fall of Rome. Really the sort of pandemic offshoot game that I think is among the most celebrated.
Yeah, excellent. I think Three Ring Circus we've talked about a little bit on this podcast, and I mean Libertalia, Ethnos games that I'm familiar with. Caesar I've played too. Yeah, so some designers I have a lot of familiarity with. Tell me
Yeah,
about Fairy Tale
definitely.
Inn.
I think this is among Paolo Mori's. He's been trending lighter. Fairy Tale Inn is a game that these two designers did together just prior to Captain Flip, and is kind of similar in that you're putting tiles down on a grid. There's some different considerations, but that's one that I've heard good things about, and I think has a little bit more scoring complexity. I haven't played it myself, but I think Captain Flip kind of iterates on that design in a lot of ways and presents a more family-focused bet. But
Yeah.
yeah, kind of cool. I'm really excited, given the success of Captain Flip, to see what comes out from Playpunk next. It'll be interesting to see if they trend more family or what the sort of weight class is for the games that they're looking to do.
Do you think Captain Flip is going to win the Spiel?
Oh my gosh. No, I think Sky Team's going to win the Spiel.
Sky Team been getting a lot of love from players and media folks, though the Spiel, they do their own thing. Like I think last year was a big surprise to folks that Challengers ended up winning over some other stuff, and I think on the Spiel side it was a surprise. Shoot, what was the game that won last year? Yeah, Dorf Romantic won
Yeah.
too. For whatever reason, Captain Flip feels like like the Spiel winner. I think
You
I
think
would.
so?
I think so.
Okay, so
Yeah.
have you played Sky Team?
I haven't. No.
Yeah, I haven't played Sky Team. I've been really interested in trying it out. It's on Board Game Arena. Sky Team is a 2-player dice allocation cooperative game in which you're trying to land your plane effectively by cooperatively playing dice to the right locations. That looks interesting. I think it's presented really cleanly, and I've heard is very thematically well done. Sort of the game pieces kind of function as you have the sort of things like the arc of your plane that you're controlling and your speed. So it's pretty thematic. But yeah, Captain Flip, maybe it has a secret sauce. We'll see. I guess we could mention the Kennerspiel.
While we're here, on the Kennerspiel side of things, the nominees this year are Daybreak, the Guild of Merchant Explorers, and Ticket to Ride Legacy Legends of the West. I don't have a lot to say about these games. I played the Guild of Merchant Explorers back in, I think, 2022 when it was released first here in the United States. I know Daybreak is another kind of pandemic-esque game by Matt Leacock that seems thematically really cool and like a game that is making a statement. I think that's exciting. And then Ticket to Ride. We talked about Ticket to Ride as a game that still holds up today. Hard for me to pick a winner here.
Yeah.
And I think my commentary is it's just always so weird to see a game pop up on this list that's been out for like 3 years
Yeah. In the
in the
US at
States.
least.
Yeah, but I know that, the criteria is when it first gets its German distribution, but
Are you
still
interested
kind
in
of,
Daybreak at all?
I would play it. I'm interested. I like, is it CMYK Games that did
Yeah,
Spots and Lacuna? And so, an interesting publisher, but I haven't played it probably for the same reason I haven't played Sky Team, which is just that I typically don't seek out cooperative
co-ops.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that it's cool that it's an asymmetric co-op, where you play as a nation, and because you're a given nation in the real world, right? Someone might be playing as the United States, and someone might be playing as China. You have these different. Your asymmetry comes in. It's a game about climate change, so it comes
Mhm.
in sort of how you affect the sort of carbon footprint of the world, or these different things. It seems neat. I'd love to take another look at it. And yeah, I have no idea what's going to win the Kennerspiel.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick Ticket to Ride Legacy.
It seems like the
Those are my
smart choice.
picks. Those are my picks.
People seem to love that game.
But anyway, that's our interlude for the Spiel and Kenner Spiel nominations this year. And another reason why you might be interested in listening to the meat of this episode, which is going to happen right after the rules interlude.
Captain Flip is a delightfully simple tile placement game for 2 to 4 players. To play Captain Flip, each player takes an identical player board and places it in front of them. This board has spaces for tiles to be placed into 5 columns, each with a varying number of rows. The game's other primary component are 2-sided tiles, depicting characters on each side with different immediate or endgame effects that include things like scoring points, taking a special map token which grants its holder 1 point at the end of their turn, placing an additional tile onto their board on that turn, flipping an adjacent tile next to the tile just placed, and more effects like this. Each player's turn is simple. Draw a tile and look only at the face of it. Then they may choose to flip it and place it on their board, or keep that character tile that they initially revealed and place that tile on their board. When placing tiles on their personal board, players simply add the tile to any column with an empty space. However, the tile must go to the lowest empty space of that column. The game end is triggered when a player completes their 4th column on their board. After ensuring all players have an equal number of turns, the game ends and the player with the most points is crowned the victor.
Thank you so much for taking the time to record the rules for this game. It was a quick one, and hopefully you now know how to play this game, and that'll give you a better sense of what we're talking about as we dive into the decision space, starting first with characterizing it.
Yeah, so I think this might be a quick characterizing the decision space section, because we can say it's a waning decision space, right? You start with all this potential. You can play to any column. It's totally open. Some columns, depending on the board that you're playing on. I didn't mention this in the rules overview, but there's actually 4 different boards that you can play in right now that I would say meaningfully affect the strategic path you might take. But it wanes as you add tiles. There's fewer places that you can place tiles. You also might create more specific, almost scoring requirements for yourself, where you sort of know, oh, I placed this gunner tile here, and I really want to flip it with a monkey. So I need to leave the column to the left of it open, so that if I ever get a monkey, and maybe I'll flip aggressively for a monkey, I'm going to put it there, flip the gunner, so I can not lose the game if I have 3 gunners.
Yeah. I like it. I feel like you're sneaking in these like elements that make it seem like there's a lot of agency already, where it's like I'm gonna aggressively flip, as though that isn't like flipping like maybe 3 tiles over the course of the game. But yeah, I definitely think there are waning elements. For me, the main feeling I get playing this game is that of a static decision space. Like you're doing the exact same thing on every single turn, drawing a tile out of the bag, choosing whether or not to flip it, and then choosing where it goes. Yes, there are some implications of, what slot you're going to put it into. If you start down a path where you get a reward, if you fill the column to the top, you're more likely to go over there. So yes, that is waning, but I think that also, like, with just the amount of like luck of the draw, both in what type of draw of the bag, and when you flip, what appears on the other side, like the more randomness inserted in a game system, I think it can cross a point where it makes decision spaces feel much more static, even if there are other elements beyond that. Does that make sense?
It does, but to me, it doesn't feel static because I think for me, Captain Flip is a game about finding. So you have 15 turns usually, typically. I mean, there's 15 spaces on a board. So depending on how much you fill the board, depending on what rows you fill, maybe you only have 10 turns. Depending on the rows that you're
Probably 10
filling,
to
maybe you have
12 would be
15.
like
Sure.
more typical.
Yeah, 10 to 12. I think that's a perfect way to think about it. And I think it's a game about finding your strategic path. There's different ways to score more than 3 points per turn on average. That's your goal. If you're looking at this game, you want to be scoring at least 3 points per turn on average, and ideally more. And eventually, because of the sort of strategic paths, usually I find that by the end, intentionally flipping. So it feels waning to me because by the latter third of the game, usually I'm executing a strategy that I've been forced into, and the game's almost sort of accelerating towards its conclusion. So I feel like for that reason, to me, it feels waning, right? I'm running out of decision space potential. I'm committing to a path and then seeing if it works out.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. I guess the last thing I'll say on it is I do agree towards the end of the game, you have more specific desires for tiles and where to place them than you do at the beginning of the game, but you don't necessarily have more agency about how to get them.
Sure. I mean, yeah, the only agency you have is to flip or not to flip.
Right. So if I want to get a navigator, which we'll talk about the tiles later on to trigger all the map maker or the map pieces,
Cartographers, yeah.
yeah, that I have on the board, that's all well and good, but I'm still having to randomly draw and flip for it.
Sure.
Like in some sense, I feel like the clarity of the decision space is waning, but the agency on your turn is so static.
Hmm.
Like, do you see the distinction that I'm drawing?
A little
Yes,
bit,
I
but
like know what I want to do, but I still have the same ability to do it that I did at the beginning.
totally. And I think
Yeah,
that feels exact. I hear you completely. Like the game does feel static in the sense that every turn you do the exact same thing. You draw a
right.
tile and you choose if you're going to flip it or if you're going to place it. But to me, the decisions that I'm making once I've made that first, decision to flip or not to flip, that even those are waning too. Like I feel like the game when I'm first starting, contrary to I don't think what you said I agree with. I think that I care a lot about what tiles I start with and I draw at the beginning, and I care a lot about what tiles I draw at the end. And those are usually different tiles, depending on my strategic path.
And so what wanes then? Like if you care at the
What
beginning and care at the end and you only have one option of flipping or not flipping,
what
does that
wanes
not
is
feel static?
am I what wanes is am I the player that's trying to accelerate the game or am I the player who's trying to complete bonuses? Am I the player who's and then nested within that is am I going for swabbies? Am I going to play more of a cartographer navigator strategy? Do I want to look for gunners and flip them
The
with
incentives
monkeys?
are changing. Your
Yes.
incentives are
Yeah.
changing of what you're looking for, but I don't know if that constitutes like a decision space that's waning just because your incentives are becoming more specific.
I hear what you're saying.
Okay, well, maybe we should move on. I'm sure
Okay.
people have a sense of who they agree with more. And certainly there are elements that wane, right? Like at the beginning, I could put it
Absolutely.
in one of 5 spots. And
And I
towards
can't
the
disagree
end,
that
maybe it goes all the way down to 2.
sure.
Crazy. What a huge change. This game. Unbelievable what they've done with that.
Do you feel like you don't okay. Do you feel that in this game you don't have interesting tile placement decisions? Like you feel like the first turn you could just put it anywhere? It doesn't matter? Because
I mean, I think there are like objectively bad things you can do in this game.
yeah.
But I don't feel no, I don't feel like I very often have a really interesting child placement decision on my first play of the game.
I feel like you can though. Like, okay, you draw a lookout, turn one on the regular basic shipboard, right?
Yeah, let me scroll
So,
down and know. So we
so
have
the
pictures of
lookout
these
is four
guys.
points, and the
Yeah, I
lookout
gotcha.
says, well, actually, the lookout can be 4 points. The lookout is
Yeah,
you score 4 points if there's no tiles above this at the end of the game.
yeah.
So 4 is great. If I'm scoring 4 every turn, I will win the game, bar none. Just easy. That you will win the game. So you're off to a great start. But if you draw at turn one, you have an interesting choice. Do you put it all the way on the left and just plan to never play a tile on it again? Or do you flip it and maybe you just flip into something better, right? Maybe you flip into a gunner that's objectively better on turn one. It's the only thing that can objectively be better. But what if you flip a cook or what if you flip a monkey and you score 0 points, right? I feel that this game's cool because every game plays out really differently given the randomness. And there's interesting decisions that can pop up like that. And then because the strategic paths are forced on you, like you don't get to choose which tiles you're drawing. This is not a
Yeah.
drafting game, right?
All of this
I'm
is implying
literally
I'm not drawing the navigator / cook card to start the game every single time.
that would, yeah. Okay, well, your chances if you draw the
I
card with
swear
the
to God,
navigator
I've
on one side
drawn
and the
it
cook on
in
the
like
other,
the last 3 games we've played together.
the chances of that are incredibly low. But you could just be the most unlucky person on the planet. You're just forced to, mop the decks every time.
Yeah.
But anyway, we should move on. And I totally agree with what you're saying, Jake. The decision space, in terms of how you're mechanically making decisions, does feel static. The turn structure is very similar. It's not changing. Your decisions are fairly similar each time. Your decisions are fairly similar from game to game, even if you are making different decisions based on having a change of inputs in terms of the tiles that you've been offered are totally different. The tiles on your opponent's board are totally different. You're still making the same decision more or less every time. Do I want to
Yeah.
flip this tile or do
Yeah.
I not want to flip this tile?
Right. Like the decision space does wane objectively,
Mhm.
but on top of that is like a tremendous amount of randomness, like
Yeah,
layered on top of that on what you draw out of the bag. And I think like the objective waning is so slight that when you take a very slight waning decision space, in my opinion, playing the game and add a ton of randomness on top of that, to me, like the effect of playing this game is like it feels static, even if like objectively it is waning.
Hmm.
So, anything else to say about the decision space, or should we just keep arguing about the type?
I think we can move on. I will say, Jake, I just want to get this out of the way. Okay. This is the last thing. It's not as if, thanks to Board Game Arena, we can see what the ELO ladder is on this game, right? And it goes into the 400s. It has a large player base and that can affect things. But it's not as if there is not skill to be had and edge to be found in this game. I don't think it is as skill testing as a game like, say, Azul, where you see ELO on Board Game Arena going up into the 700s in these sort of like astronomically high numbers, right? Luck plays a role. The skill ladder is shorter than other games, but it's breezy, it's fun, and I find the decisions are pretty engaging. But that's the last I'll say. I think luck plays an important role, but I think you can nudge it in the direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying there's no skill in this game at all,
I know you were. I'm sorry.
but
I
I want
wasn't
to
trying to strawman you.
make the case anyway about why I think the ELO of this game maybe doesn't say the same what you're implying, that it's like, a relatively like, okay, so here's the pushback argument on that would be like okay, there might be, if this game has like a 51% edge to the more skilled player, and I think it's greater than that, right? If you can play it like 20 times in an hour online, then like that small edge means more here, right? People will
Sure.
be able to get up higher, winning 51% of their games quicker than they could in a longer game. The other thing with that is, and this is another kind of criticism I have with the game, is like I would like this game more if when you drew a tile out of the bag, you were like, I don't like the flip mechanism. I don't like how you're flipping it and there's something on the other side. I would like it better if you just drew another random tile out of the bag, because the fact that these are real pieces that exist means that there's like a certain number of tiles, meaning that like if somebody wanted to engage in really paying intense, focus on like what tiles have already come out, you could get small edges
Yeah.
on just like knowledge of what is likely to flip. And I think for a game as like simple, light, and family weight as that, like I have no interest in doing that. And I'm certain that the people at the top end of the ELO like are, right?
Sure. Yeah. So the tile set is that there's 2 copies of every possible tile combo in the game, right? So was that intuitive? That's intuitive, right? I don't need to explain that. There's
Yeah,
8.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that this is an area where this game could really rub up against some players. And if you're listening to the show and you're sort of like, oh, this game sounds cool, there are some things you should know about this game that if you come at board games and this is so funny because we as game players take games too seriously. We just do, right? Like we've
Yeah.
dedicated a show to like, we're going to play this family game on Board Game Arena 200 times and then talk about it.
Hey,
And
you're the one who brought ELO into this.
I did. I just, but you were saying, But anyway, I, memory plays a meaningful role in the decision space of this game because of the monkey tile. And also what you're saying that you really could and probably should be watching. But I found, Jake, right, whenever a game does this, where you have this sort of like tile set that's supposed, the odds are supposed to be kind of obfuscated. You're not really supposed to know. This is like I feel like this is a really French designer thing. Like whenever we cover Bruno Cathala games, he's always doing this thing, right? Where like in King Domino, you're supposed to just sort of intuit what the different terrains are common and what different terrains are rare. And you're not supposed to have a perfect idea of the odds. We've talked about this a lot. Or in Kanagawa, where he'll give you a taste on the back, and that's another Bruno Cathala game, a taste of this is what's probably on the front of this card. But I'm not going to tell you exactly what the distribution of the deck is. And Captain Flip's doing something really similar in a way, functionally. I mean, I can sit here and say the tile set is X, but when you're playing the game, it just sort of feels like this. You could look around the table, and if you see a lot of gunners, know that it's unlikely you're going to flip and get a gunner, right? And that's probably good enough in most situations. But yeah, if you're like trying to go for the top ranking on Board Game
Yeah,
Arena,
right.
you should
Yeah.
sit there and you should.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably
Yeah.
should. I doubt many people are really
No one's doing
doing
that.
that
Yeah.
either, but, like, but there is the fact that, like, I need to flip into a navigator here, and if, like, I already know that the Cook navigator has been used,
Twice. Yeah.
like, I have the ability to have, like, the objective, or even once, right? Like, I can make the really
Sure.
high percentage call that that's unlikely to be it. So, I don't know. I think
It just bugs you.
it just bugs me. All else equal, right? And I think the reason they've done this makes sense for, like, on the table, it does streamline things, right? But
Totally.
if all else were equal, would you prefer to have a completely random result on the back versus the way it actually works in the real world?
Okay. Yeah, you got me. Hypothetically, yes. But
Yes, we
yeah,
got him.
you got me. Hypothetically,
Hang the banner.
now that you've
Ding
laid it
ding
out this
ding
way,
ding.
yes. But that's in reality, real life on the table. We're hilarious because this is a 10-minute, 15-minute game, right? I don't care. I want to flip the tiles, and it's fun, and it's a good marketing pitch, and I want to just see what happens, and I want to just flip and see if I get the navigator, play it down, get 8 points, have a huge grin on my face because one tile gave me 8 points, and feel great. You
And
know?
totally, and that's how I want to play this too. But my suspicion after playing this game quite a few times is that, like, most of the actual skill and player separation is on that memorizing versus,
Mm.
like, the strategic decision making about where to place your tiles, which I think is pretty obvious most of the time. And then, like, the flipping, like, doing this, like, the odds of what to get. I mean, I don't know. It just
Okay.
doesn't seem like it. I think for this weight of game, like,
Yeah.
that is asking a lot of players, right? That's like a really high level sort of like, the probability generating thing is just really tough.
I'm so mad at myself that I ever mentioned ELO on our Captain Flip episode. Like I'm beyond
All
angry
right,
at
we'll
myself.
stop.
But no, I have to make one more point. Okay, I disagree. I don't think that's where most of the edge comes from in this game. I think most of the edge in playing Captain Flip comes from knowing, okay, in my first 6 tiles, I drew some tiles, I made some decisions, and now those decisions around when do I want the game to end? What is my position in relation to everyone else? What outs do I have to still win? That game structure, game length decision over which I have very little but some control, very little but some control, is the game. Knowing what I should do on turn 6, between turn 6 and turn 10, turn 4 and turn 10, turn 1 and turn 10, whatever, in the mid game is the game. And being good at the game is knowing when you should be flipping and when you shouldn't be flipping, when you should be accepting a 3-point turn and when you should be going for a 4-point turn, or when you should be fine with playing a swabby on turn 2, or when you should, right? Like that's where this game I think comes alive for me, and knowing, okay, I drew this Cook, it's going to give me 3 points. Is that good enough right now? And, ultimately you can't really know. But the reason why I said this, I got to 350 ELO in Captain Flip, not tile counting at all, just making intuitive, instinctive decisions, which that's probably, if someone's thinking, see, this is why you never should have mentioned ELO, Brendan, because that's in the margin of error or whatever for ELO. Yeah, sure, totally. Yeah, I know. I think because the probabilities in this game are so big, the impact in terms of the number of navigators in the game on the backs of tiles, Jake, for the pool overall versus the fact that you could know what's on one side of the tile because there's two copies, and like if you were really counting, I feel like the edge that gets you in terms of percentages is so small that most of the time, like if you already have four cartographers on your board, and if you draw a tile and it's not a navigator, you should just flip the tile over and check, you know? Like, because at that point you've committed so hard that you need to be doing the combo thing. Like and that's a reason not to like this game potentially too. Like, oh, I drew 3 Swabies, and now the rest of my game is I just have to flip them until I get 5 Swabies.
But the saving grace is that the rest of the game is probably like 4 minutes
No,
at that
totally.
point, max. Yeah.
And if you score 25 points off Swabies, it feels amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think probably it comes down to a sort of a question of like, clearly we have to both be in agreement that this is not a game that has like a high advantage to the more skilled player, right? Like in the greater scheme of things.
No, I think, okay, this is like a 65% win game for the more skilled player, I bet. Yeah.
I
I
would
think we're in
think,
like Star Realms territory.
oh, okay. So that's a huge difference between where we're approaching this game. I would
You
think
think
more,
it's lower?
I would think like 55, maybe.
Interesting. I think it's a little higher than you think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
maybe
we got
so.
there. We got there. We got there.
All right. What else
Where
should
do
we
we go
talk
from
about?
here?
Yeah, I know.
We have this large sea in front of us. We kind of like prodded at all these different areas.
Yeah. We couldn't help ourselves. We couldn't rein it in
Yeah.
to get through this in a sensible, orderly way. So maybe we should start here. Like the key decision on your turn is like to flip or not.
Yep, that is the question.
Right. And so we've talked a little bit about that, right? With like once you've kind of committed on a path, what heuristic are you using here? Like that example of the lookout or whatever in the
Yeah.
first turn. Is that what's your play?
Oh my gosh. I mean, my play typically is I can do better than tanking a whole column turn 1.
Yeah.
But it depends on what was on the front side, right? If I put something on the front side, if there was something on the front side that I flipped, I should use
What
a real
I know, saying
example.
you draw the lookout. You're
Oh,
deciding
you
whether or not
draw
to
the
flip.
lookout? If you
Yeah.
draw the lookout, you flip it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then another question becomes like, okay, you flipped it, and now it's a lookout. On the front board, you put it all the way on the left, I think. And then you have to make the later decision around, do I try to leave it open or do I try never to play that column again, right?
Yeah.
Can I make my game can I force my tiles into being a late game build rather than a parrot rush build such that I can just leave that lookout there and probably be the one and probably score 4 points for it and feel good about it, right? Like, can I just go for the map bonus? That's a long game play, so I'm then moving to the row over. Can I try to get the bonus off the mast for 5, get the bonus on the very right, and then not be the one who's ending the game? And I think that's kind of fun, that decision. Like, that's a little nudge that says, like, maybe you want to not be the player who ends it.
Yeah. It's so interesting too, because every time you flip over the tile, assuming, equal odds,
Yeah.
you've got like you got a 1 in 7 chance of hitting a specific tile, right? So in
Yeah.
general, like if you're looking for one thing, flipping it is almost always bad odds. You might
Right.
use heuristics of looking around to see something's better, or okay, like you're saying, if there's a whole bunch of gunners out there, I'm probably not getting one. It's less likely that I get one. But yeah, I think that might be an important heuristic here too, is just like if you have something good, or
Play it.
reasonably good, play it.
Yeah, usually in Captain Flip, you don't want to flip until late game when you probably want to flip. Right, mid to late game.
That's
If you're
such
losing.
a funny statement.
Yeah, because mid to late game, either you're behind and you need to find an out, right? So either you're behind because someone's going to fill up their board before you and you need to find a way to actually fill up your board first, so you're looking for parrots. Or you're trying to find navigators to go along with all the cartographers you've put on your board, or you're looking for Swabies, or we could go on. Or you have 3 gunners on your board and you have to direly find a monkey, otherwise you will lose the game. What do you think about that decision, Jake? I know we're going to talk about tiles in a minute and go in depth on each tile, and I think that's probably the section we could go to next. But one thing that really resonated with me about Captain Flip that was just viscerally fun. I think there's a visceral fun factor of Captain Flip that I can't ignore. This is Tetris light, the lightest Tetris gets. But if you, because all you have to place in the bottom row, it's almost like they're falling, whatever. The gunner puzzle around the gunner's clearly the best tile in the game. What's the drawback? If you do it too much, you lose. But you could go further. You could get 3, but you're not knocked out of the game. You can flip it over. What do you think about this little puzzle hidden inside the game?
Yeah, I mean, first I'll say like the visceral fun of this game is undeniable. I
Yeah,
think, it's just the first time you show it to somebody, it's like delight. And I
yeah,
want that to come across really clear too, when I'm critical of kind of like the decision space. But I think part of the visceral joy of it is like you play it and you're almost like, is this even a game? It's so slight, right? And then you play it more and you have to decide if you're a Brendan and think it is a game or Jake and maybe not. Um, but yeah, I mean, the gunner puzzle I think it's like a neat, clever hook. I don't think
yeah.
it's hard for me to say that's like more interesting or less interesting than any other, and putting in quotes, puzzle that you might be trying to like do in the game.
It's fun. I think that it's such a good design decision, actually, because it's a really immediately viscerally fun mechanism, right? Like, it's fun to just draw a tile from a bag, and this one's worth 5.
Yeah,
This is so
great.
silly, but it's like, oh, it feels good, like a gunner. I know I'm smart if I put this on my board, and it's just this little tiny and then okay. So push your luck games, right? Where if you do too much of the thing and then it goes wrong, then basically you lose, right? That's what this is. It's a push your luck mechanism. And I think that it leads to really interesting decisions, right? Okay, I have 2 gunners on my board, and it's the mid to late game, and I also have 3 cartographers. So if I drew a navigator, which says I get 2 points for every cartographer on my board, I get 6 points. That's amazing. But if I flip and it's a gunner, I could lose the game. I have to be looking at everyone else's boards, and I have to be thinking about, am I winning? Am I behind? Given the fuzziness of what could happen, should I be flipping? I don't think it's always an easy decision, and I think it's fun.
Yeah.
Ultimately, like I don't know. I just think this is a really good design decision that creates stakes at a point in the game where things could feel frivolous. And I think that that's really cool. The threat of an instant loss in a 10-minute game is fun for me, right? Like, and that's another little design element that I feel like, I don't know. It reminds me, we're in, Playpunk is co-founded by Antoine Bauza. It reminds me of another Bruno Cathala, I am mentioning him again, game that he did with Antoine Bauza, Seven Wonders Duel, where you have these immediate lose conditions that add a lot of tension to the game. And because this game is so quick, I don't know. I just think it's good. I feel like any sub 50-minute game having this like potential immediate loss thing just raises the stakes. And oftentimes in short games, you don't have high stakes because oftentimes you get large stakes in, say, a longer game. Imperial 2030, a Maccarth's game. We spent 2 hours playing it where we invested a lot into our decisions, building up these board positions. The stakes are there. I've invested time into it. Here, I've only invested 10 minutes, so the stakes feel really low. And this is a nice way to create and just give tension to a simple decision that I think is smarter than it initially seems, and something that if someone's designing a short game, you shouldn't just irk at the idea. And then, also, we're going to design it so you're not actually eliminated. You have the chance of coming back. But I will say, playing this game with 4 gunners flipped face off on your board feels terrible. Thinking you could dig yourself out of the hole and the monkeys will never come.
No. Yeah, because you have 1 in 7 chance of getting one
Yeah, yeah,
if you
yeah.
have to flip. Yeah, so I mean, I agree. I think good design decision. Let's talk a little bit about the stress and, stakes of this game, because that's something I've
Yeah.
been actually talking about with some folks in the Discord about, like, how folks saying that it feels, like, stressful to gamble and flip a card. Like that, like the flipping the tile is also elevating the
Hmm.
stakes and tension of the game because it's like a gambling proposition
Huh.
more so than if you were like, able to look and choose. Like that would be less stressful.
I mean,
And so I'm not advocating at all. Like Captain Flip would be an objectively worse game, in my opinion, if you took a tile out of the bag and got to choose which side to use. That would take like
yeah.
almost all of the fun out of this game. But I bring it up because I actually had a different experience with this, of sort of like the not knowing makes me, it takes a lot of the tension out of the game for me, because I think like the way when I play games, like it's important to me for whatever reason, to try and like do the best with the information I have. To like the stressful thing is in a game like In the Year of the Dragon, or like a
Yeah.
game like chess. We have like a ton of open information to see, and then you make your decision, and when you doom yourself, that like having all the information, having to choose the best thing, like that's stressful. But here, having such limited information and flipping is fun, but it's not stressful, and it kind of makes me, I think in some sense, and maybe unfairly to the game, like not care as much about the other decisions I'm making.
On this point, I agree with you, but I also obviously agree if you could pick the side, the game would not be as good, right?
Yeah,
So
right.
I think the mechanism is working, but to boil the decisions down to its most basic form, I completely hear what you're saying, Jake, because you're not going to flip the tile unless you stand to gain something, right? If you draw something really good, right? If you draw a cook that can score you 5 points, you're going to put it on your board. You're
But it
not
could
going to be like,
even be
oh,
a
could I
cook.
flip it? Right? Like, but if you, so the decisions in this game oftentimes are, do you want 2 points, or would you rather risk getting 0 points or 1 point? Or do you want to risk it and go for 3 or 4 or 5 points, right? Or maybe if it's late game, 7 points or 6 or 8 points with the navigator. Again, those are the decisions you're typically making. But there's other decisions in terms of placement and setting up your board and a little light adjacency puzzle. And on the puzzle scale, callback, we're at like a 10. And there's not a lot of puzzle here, maybe a 5. But it's there just enough. There are footholds for your brain to jump onto, but once you found them, you found them. Like it's not, that element of the game is not so different every time.
That's so interesting because yeah, it's definitely, yeah, it's more on intuitive play, which is kind of the term we're going to use instead of
Sure.
gaminess. It's more on intuitive, but it feels like that like intuitive play of it, is feels somewhat like knowable. Like there
Yeah.
is like probabilities out there.
Your
Um
agency's so low and the probabilities are low. So
Yeah, right. But like, that where it's like, okay, I want to get like a computer could play this game
perfectly.
perfectly, right? Because they could be like, this many tiles are out of the bag.
Yeah.
These four sides are good, or better than this, and there's X left. So like, objectively, the play here is to flip.
I'm losing by this many points. I have to make up a 10-point disadvantage.
Yeah, and I
So
think
I have to
that
play
just
risky. Yeah.
speaks to me as like a gamer, like that sort of like knowing that the probabilities are like out there, but like being asked to play intuitively is something that can kind of just like jar against what I want to be doing in games. But let's just say one more time how stupid it is that we're talking about all this with a game like Captain Flip.
And maybe how engaging. Like, I I like this
Like,
game way more than I expected to like it, and I have way more fun playing it than I think I should. So there's something here about the design that's working really well that I feel like it's beneficial for us to have this discussion about because we're getting to interesting things, right?
yeah, and
Part of it's just the accessibility.
I don't mean stupid to talk about Captain Flip on this show. I think it's a great idea
No,
to
for
talk about.
sure.
I
I
mean,
hear
like
you.
stupid to be like the probabilities are out there. Like I can't solve it, and therefore it's not fun to make
We're not
decisions.
yeah.
Like, I'm
We're
stupid. It's
we
me.
know we're
Okay.
taking this more seriously than we should, so we don't want to take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah.
So you're
Exactly.
saying that to be, yeah, as a way of acknowledging the fact that we know we're being ridiculous
All right. Let's fly through
while
these.
enjoying being ridiculous.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's fly through the card types a little bit. The
Okay.
tiles. Let's talk about them.
So
There's
there are
8,
eight
right?
eight tiles in the game, and that's all you get. When I first played Captain Flip, I sort of thought, oh, maybe you could have different tile sets, and maybe that will still happen. Right now in Captain Flip, there are 8 tiles. That is all you ever play with. So the first two we have to talk about together. It's the cartographer, and the cartographer says, take the treasure map and place it near your board. You have the treasure map. When you have the treasure map, at the end of your turn, you score a point. And that goes alongside the navigator, which says take 2 coins per cartographer on your board. So these are with 2 tiles, it's the foundation of a whole strategic path for the entire game, right?
I can't help but like laugh every time you say strategic path.
But it matters. It's
It does,
there.
but okay, here's the interesting thing I think about the cartographers is that you get a coin at the end of your turn if you have the map
The
that
map.
the
Yeah.
cartographer gives you. So it's like wildly better at a 2-player game than it is at a 4-player game because there's such a higher likelihood in a 2-player game that your cartographer will stick around for more than a single turn. And
Yeah.
if a turn is all you get, probably not a good cost benefit
Investment.
analysis to like keep it almost ever.
Yeah.
And then
But
and then in like a two-player game, like a cartographer on turn one could just like run away with the game in some sense, you know, like it could take, if it sits out there 6 turns, half the game, which is totally possible. That's like such a steep hill to climb.
I think that it's a really interesting way in which these two tiles are designed together too, though, Jake, because in the scenario you described where you get a turn one cartographer and the other player just can't, they never draw into, or they choose to flip away from them. On turn one, you place it, say it's a 12-turn game, netted like 11 points from one tile. It's actually, the cartographer could be the highest if you played early, hypothetically. It never would be, but it hypothetically could be the most
Right.
rewarding tile you play. In that scenario, the navigator, the tile that's supposed to make the cartographer way better, actually is worse because you only ever played one. Like,
Right.
there would be not a lot of reason when you have the map to ever play the cartographer. So it kind of self-balances that in a way. And I think that's just kind of cool. And then also it feels bad, right? Where, okay, I draw a cartographer. There's this whole mechanism around passing this map around the board. And then let's say you make some flip decisions. You already had the map. So now you have all these cartographer tiles and you didn't score any extra points because of the map. I got unlucky. Oh, and now I have this out where the navigator is going to help me re-earn a lot of the points back. I think the dynamics are kind of interesting and kind of fun, but they do also lead to on the board, on the front board, the main board, the sort of ship board, the first one you're supposed to play. A common strategic approach is the column that gives you the map bonus. You just your first two
Right.
tiles there, and then you wait. But I think that also, you wait to do that until you want to take the map back, and you take the map back the first time someone else plays a cartographer. But I think it leads to this interesting dance where you sort of have this cartographer off, and in the early game you're jockeying for map control, and then once the dust settles, someone kind of has the map, and then it's on the other player to contest it. And I think it actually ends up being this nice sort of fencing match back and forth for the cartographer, where you're having to make these interesting value judgments around, I really don't want to add this cartographer to my board. I'd rather flip this and try to get a gunner or the swabby that I need, or a cook, because I have a good spot for a cook right now. But I can't let Jake have it one more turn. Or can I let him have just one more turn? It's only 1 point.
Yeah, it's like all these tiles, you have to consider the fact that you might never draw one.
Draw.
At any
Yeah.
point in the game,
Yeah.
it's possible that you'll never see another cartographer or navigator or anything, right?
Yeah.
Which I think it does create that nice like game of chicken there,
Yeah.
but it can also kind of be a little bit a moot point because maybe it's like, yes, I've won that game of chicken, and then somebody just draws a cartographer out of the bag, and then it's like, well, crap, you know, there goes that.
Totally. I have found the more I play, the more I'm happy to put cartographers on my board early.
Yeah,
Initially, I kind of felt like, oh, this feels random, but especially because I didn't like having to hunt for navigators at the end, and the intrinsic luck of, okay, I could score 8 points, so I should probably be flipping in case I could. But I think it just on average, you just net a lot of points playing this strategy. I think it's
the
generally
way,
good.
yeah, the way you, I think, deal with navigator existing in the tile set is just like it just makes cartographers better.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like what you have to play this game, right? Because again, like you can try for a strategic path all you want, but
Yeah,
there's
but if
zero
you don't know the tiles.
guarantee
Yeah.
you'll see anything, either of the tiles you're looking for, if it's cartographers and navigators together. So it's just all the navigator existing, to me, it just makes cartographer better. And
Yeah.
then if you happen to flip into one, great, good thing I've been playing cartographers every chance I got.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
Well, and if you have more than 3 cartographers on your board, or 3 or more, I'm much more likely to flip. And I'm much less likely to put the second gunner down. And I'm not placing it. If I'm going for cartographers, I'm not going for swabbies,
right.
because I see those as being at odds. I think we should move on. Because
Yeah.
now we've talked for just 2 tiles for about 5 minutes. But the next tile is really important. This is another just cornerstone foundational tile of the game, the parrot. This is a negative 1 point
I
card.
think they're all cornerstone foundational.
I think yes and no. Okay, so the parrot, the cook is fine. Take it or leave it. You're not going to build your board so you can place cooks well.
No,
but anyway,
but they're intrinsically related to the.
Okay, the parrot's
Okay,
really
parrot.
important though, right? Because the parrot is the only agency you have in the game to be able to accelerate it. So the parrot says draw and play a new tile, but you lose a point. And it also says, the parrot also says you're losing the opportunity cost of playing a different tile. But you could also flip it with a tile we'll talk about in the future. So I think parrots are kind of fun because you can speed up the game potentially. Or you can pump the brakes by, if you draw a parrot and you know you're the player who wants the game to go long, you flip it. You got to flip it. You got to flip it. Right? Like usually.
Yeah. I think parrots are like low key one of the like maybe just the best tile to have
Yeah.
in your position. Like having that agency to control the end game, whether you want it to end quickly or not, is so crucial. And also on some of the all of the boards, like having agency over when you are able to like summit certain tiles is huge. Like we just talked about the treasure map one, being able to just jump all the way up to 3, right? If you get parrot something, well,
Yeah.
sure, I'll take that treasure map right now, thank you. And have fun waiting 3 turns to get it. Or some of the boards offer like a race. The first person to get here gets X. Somebody else
Yeah.
gets the lesser total. And so I think for all those reasons, the parrot is great. It also just lets you see another tile.
And you can flip it later. So you can
Yeah,
mitigate the cost potentially.
and the cost itself is just not high.
Yeah. Though I don't think you want to be in the business of playing monkeys to flip parrots unless you know what's on the other side and you are assured of what you're going to get too often, right?
Yeah.
If you draw a parrot, put it on your board, taking a monkey to flip it, I guess we're talking about the monkey now. The monkey's a tile that says flip a tile adjacent to this tile. I don't think you want to be using monkeys to flip tiles where you don't know what you're doing. I
Mhm.
think you want to be
Uh,
using monkeys most of the time to flip gunners face down so you can flip them face back later or just play another gunner to your board. Or you want to be flipping down parrots, that sort of thing.
yeah, I agree. I think they're like an important utility piece that can be super crucial, right? There's times when like monkey's going to be the only tile that does it for you based on
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
board, right? If you've got 3 gunners out there, then monkey,
Yeah,
that's
you're
the
team
one you
monkey.
want.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last thing I want to say on the parrot, just to add to it, I feel like when you don't play a game and don't get access to parrots, it does feel like you're like have less agency
Yeah.
than a typical game, which is already like so slight.
Yeah.
Um,
Every time you play Captain Flip, you'd rather see parrots and have the choice to flip them rather
right.
than never see a parrot, for sure.
Yeah. Cooks, you maybe just don't want to see at all.
Yeah.
The
Take
cook, you
one
get
coin.
1 coin per character in the row, including the cook. So you're always guaranteed one, and your maximum is 5. But it's pretty rare, I think, that you have
Yeah.
the opportunity. Like things just have to work out so perfectly that you're getting maximum value out of a cook, especially with the way a lot of the boards are set up, offset columns.
Columns. Yeah.
That just makes it really hard. The pirate ship, the main starting board, you can't even get 5.
Yeah.
4 would be the most you could get there.
The cook in general, I think, is, yeah, you're just not thinking about the cook. It doesn't factor into your decisions too often.
Yeah. And I was joking earlier when I was saying how I always start with the cook navigator tile, but that is the worst possible starting tile. It has to be.
Easily.
Right?
Yeah.
You see the navigator, it does absolutely nothing for you. So you flip it, you get the cook, you're like, all right, well, at least I got 1 coin.
Navigator monkey feels pretty bad too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the same thing, but yeah.
Same.
Okay, so then there's Swabby. Swabby is triangular scoring. So the first Swabby in a column is 1 point. The second Swabby, don't they have to be in different columns, Jake? Yeah,
I
yeah, they
don't
have to be in different columns.
Oh
So
yeah.
if you have at least one Swabby in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 columns, you score 1, 4, 9, 16, or 25 points. So if you have one Swabby in 5 columns, if you have 5 Swabbies and they're all in a different column, you score 25 points. So it turns each of your Swabbies into 5-point tiles, or they're 4-point tiles, or they're 3-point tiles, or they're 2-point tiles. I find that Swabbies in general, amazing if you draw them early. Like I'm fine going for Swabbies. I like the Swabby strat, but unless I've committed to it by turn 3, I'm flipping Swabbies and I never want to see them.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Okay, and then we've talked about Monkey, we've talked about Gunner a lot. We have not talked about Carpenter, which is the
Yeah.
flip side, not the flip side, but kind of the antithesis to the Gunner strategy. So Carpenter's is probably the most, I don't know, intriguing of the puzzles. Basically, a Carpenter, you don't want them to see the Gunner. There were 3 points at the end of the game if there's no Gunner in the column or row that the Carpenter's in. The fact that it's 3 points at the end and not like an immediate 3 means that like Carpenter is just not very strong, right? Like it's 3 points at best, and with only the potential of being,
With a
put in a
downside.
position where it goes down.
Yeah. I think this is literally the curve defining tile. You want to, on a given turn, you want to be better than a Carpenter. So I'm happy playing Carpenters if I'm in the lead, and I'm unhappy playing them if I'm behind, right?
Yeah.
So if I look at my board and I'm like, oh, I'm winning, I'll happily throw down a carpenter.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, but otherwise, flip them. You're
Right.
looking for something else. Early game, probably flip them.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if you're like it stinks getting stuck with a carpenter in your first row when you have 5
5 on the
spaces there.
bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
dang, this is going to be really irritating. I found myself, speaking of my own skill in this game, very frequently taking penalties for monkeys because of like poor planning or play.
For carpenters, you mean?
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry for carpenters.
For
Yeah, like
carpenters,
I've
yeah.
got like the carpenter, and I flip my tile, and I'm like, wait, crap. Now I have no choice. But
It's going to see a gunner. Yeah.
yeah,
It feels bad. Yeah. Objectively horrible. 0
I mean,
points.
yeah, a tile for 0 points this game is really bad.
Not where you want to be. Next is Monkey. That's the flipping one. I like this tile a lot. I think this design helps give the game some turn-to-turn planning. I like that you can set up situations where you're kind of fishing for setting up a flipping a gunner so that you can play another gunner and get another 5-point windfall, that sort of thing. I'll also add, when I taught this game to my wife, Maya, she said, why is there a rat swinging on a rope in this game? And I was like, it's a monkey. It says monkey.
It's also like so interesting. I really didn't even think about this until you mentioned it, that the monkey is just a pure memory
Yeah.
mechanism. Yeah, if
Yeah.
you don't remember what was on the other side of that tile,
I mean, you
you're going
could
to be in
just
a
flip it,
way
but
worse position in the game than if you knew what you're flipping into.
yeah. Monkey in general, yeah, you just want to. It's a tool you want to use when you have to. But I don't know. I do the games where you get early gunners and then you try to flip them with monkeys and then so you can play more gunners. I find are fun. Like I'm happy doing that strategy. I
Yeah,
don't know that it's
the strategic path I choose to play in this game is just I go for like 10 monkeys. So I flip a monkey that flips a
flip
monkey.
monkey to flip monkey.
Yeah, I usually choose that strategy in this game since I have so much
I
agency
mean,
to choose a
you're just
strategic path.
jesting, but yeah, okay. Ultimately, you end up in whatever strategy you're dealt. That's how this game is played. But I do think it's fun when you monkey chain. You flip the monkey to flip the tile that flips a monkey that flips a tile. You could end up doing some fun stuff there. I don't think you should ever like angle for that. And at the best, because your agency is low, you're always just angling for a strategy. You're never picking it. And then there's the lookout. Take 4 coins if there's no character above this tile. This lends the game planning. It's fun. You like scoring 4 points. It's fun to look down at your board and see 4 lookouts on the top of 4 columns and know you're going to score 16 points, right? It's like, this is like Swabby, but better, right? So if you have 4 lookouts, you score 16 points. If you have 4 Swabbies, you score 16 points. But lookouts scale linearly and Swabbies do not.
Mhm.
So lookouts are better because 2 lookouts is, do you get the payoff of having just 2 lookouts on your board, meaning maybe you could put something higher scoring in the spots where you would have put the other ones, is such that it's actually better than having, you get what I'm saying. Do you get what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
lookouts are
Okay.
just objectively better than Carpenter in almost every way. Like
Yeah.
you never would be forced in a position to like screw over your own lookout.
Yeah. Unless
Like
you
I can't.
flip it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even if you flip right,
Maybe
like
you just
you would
stop
just
playing in that column. Yeah.
yeah, you would never have to do it
Sure.
in the
Though I've
same way
certainly
that
done
you
that.
can with Carpenters. And then it's just so much easier to put it in a position where it's like you're never going to have a desire to do that, right? Like
Yeah.
a lookout is, if you play it at the top of a column that is now filled up, it is like forever safe.
Totally.
The same is
Oh,
not necessarily true with Carpenters.
should we? So that's the tile sets. Should we just fly through the boards and call it a day?
Yeah, let's do it.
Call it an adventure. Okay.
Do you
Maybe
feel
we.
like the boards? I definitely like the boards being different. You know,
Yeah.
no complaints about that. They give you slightly different puzzles to work through. That's my like top level notes, but they're not wildly changing the game by any means.
No, I do think some of them maybe make some of the tiles better or worse than others. The desert island kind of, this is one where you potentially take, if you score one of the columns, there's a bonus where you get 2 coins for each other completed column on your board. I think this one makes parrots a strong tile, even stronger in a way that I'm not a huge fan of. I think the tile set feels the most balanced on the baseboard, the pirate ship, and I like the dynamic of playing with the map. I like the raft board quite a bit. That has the treasure map bonus, but it also has a column where you want your characters to be identical and a column where you want your characters to be all different in those columns. And I think that leads to some fun, interesting decisions around flipping, where I'm playing tiles at times I wouldn't normally. And then I like the Kraken. That's the one, Jake, where you were talking about where there's some sequencing ones that matter. If you're the first one, you get this many points. If you're second, you get these.
Yeah, I think I'm like with you. The pirate ship is nice. The baseboard, just for like, it feels like the tile set is like almost
Made for that.
is made for that, right? That's like, because there's nothing really crazy there. It's just kind of like it allows you to see the inherent balance of the tile set and play with that.
Yeah.
I think with all the other ones, they're all fine. Like, no complaints if we just play a random board and get any of them. I
Yeah.
don't think it makes it any worse. The Kraken's probably the most interesting to me just because, like, we like the game of chicken offered by the treasure
Yeah.
maps. And the Kraken is just all of that, right? Where you start going up one thing, like, you kind of have to finish it first. I guess it's not really a game of chicken, but like, you're kind of look at what other people are doing. But the issue with that, and like with all these other ones, is that the benefits just become more significant in all cases of getting to the top, making parrots just like even more vital to success in
Yeah.
the game.
Yep. I think my ranking is Pirate Ship, Raft, Kraken, Desert Island.
Okay,
But
I would
yeah, I'll
go.
play on any of them.
Yeah, I would go Pirate Ship, Kraken, and the other two.
Equal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So that's Captain Flip. I guess the final thing, I like this game way more at 2 players than I do at higher player counts. I feel like
Yeah.
the luck factor is even higher at higher player counts, and it's fun. I'd love to play it in a family game setting in that way. If I'm playing it trying to win, which maybe it's silly to say that about Captain Flip, but I want to play it too.
The
I think it's
ELO
best at 2.
version. Yeah, you
Yeah,
want the arena board game arena challenges 2-player for sure. We played a bunch of 4-player games of this in our Discord. Maybe we did a tournament of it, and
Yeah.
it just felt like complete and utter chaos, which I think
Yeah.
is great for
Yeah.
young kids, a family. That's awesome. But I'm with you. To the extent that you really want to pull apart the puzzle, the 2-player game is the only one where that really makes any sense at all. Otherwise,
And
the
that's
randomness just too great.
calling back a couple episodes. Jake, let's close with what's your rating? How puzzly is Captain Flip on a scale of 0 to 100? With 100 being the most puzzle, being a puzzle.
Yeah, I think I would say like 30.
30. Okay, I said 10. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I was trying to say, like, the weird thing is, like, I know that it's like 100% puzzly to like a computer,
Sure. Yeah.
So like that is like, I can't get that thought kind of like out of
Out of
my
your head.
head.
Yeah.
That like there's no opponent interaction really in the way that you would find it. Yes, you're racing for various things, but you're not actually like interacting with each other in a way that would like create any kind of like donkey space or
Yeah.
these
Yeah, in the
other elements
slightest.
that
Yeah.
typically have a huge impact on like how intuitive the play space is.
Yeah. Yeah. That
So
made
this
well
has none
said.
of.
Yeah. Perfect.
So anyway, an interesting game. I think well qualified for the spiel. And that's our thoughts on the decision space in Captain Flip.
Yeah. Can't wait to see what's next for Play Punk, the cool new publisher.
Totally.
And yeah, thank you to Hembry for our intro and outro song, Reach Out. If you want to discuss this episode with Jake and I and other Decision Space listeners like you, you can do that. Come to the link to the Discord in our show notes. And Discord's just like a chat room in your browser, and talk with us about the show. Tell us what we got wrong about Captain Flip or what we were flipping right about. And we'd love to hear if there's games you think we should cover, topics we should discuss. Let us know. We love talking with listeners. If you'd like to show your support of Decision Space, you can do that on decisionspacepodcast.com/Patreon, where you get access to potentially our show notes early and a recording of us recording Decision Space with video unedited before other listeners. So early access by at least a few hours usually.
Some
and
fun
sometimes even
blunders in
days.
this one.
Yeah. Lots of fun blunders. So until next time, thank you so much for listening. And yeah, bye y'all.
Bye, y'all.